The massive shadow of the Hegemony flagship Dominion's edge stretched across the Pacific Ocean like a metallic storm cloud. Admiral Kexthaler stood on the bridge, his forearms crossed in satisfaction as he watched the last human military installation surrender one by one. The holographic display showed green markers replacing red across every continent. Victory had come faster than expected. Pathetic, he muttered to his tactical officer, Lieutenant Vordenna. 4 to 7 hours. That's all it took to break their spirit. The bridge crew of various alien species nodded in agreement. The Zephyrians, with their crystalline skin, reflected the blue glow of the control panels. The hulking Brutax grunted their approval, their massive forms barely fitting in the reinforced chairs. Even the normally cautious Mind Area observers seemed pleased, their tentacles writing notes in the air with bioluminescent ink. Their weapons were primitive, Vordenna reported, scanning the tactical readouts. Chemical propulsion, electromagnetic railguns, basic fusion warheads. Nothing our shields couldn't handle. Their largest navy was destroyed in the first 6 hours. Kexthaler moved to the central viewing platform, his reptilian eyes studying the planet below. Earth looked so ordinary from space. Blue and green, with swirling white clouds. Just like the previous 37 worlds they had conquered, the Hegemony's expansion across the galaxy had been methodical, overwhelming, and utterly successful. Begin the extraction protocols, he ordered. I want all their industrial centers mapped within the next 12 hours. Their population centers need to be cataloged for the labor assignments. The Dominion's Edge was just one of 1,200 ships in the invasion fleet. Dreadnoughts, carriers, destroyers, and transport vessels filled the space around Earth like metal locusts. Each ship represented decades of technological advancement by the galaxy's most powerful military alliance. The humans had nothing that could challenge even their smallest frigate. On the planet's surface, the aftermath of surrender was already beginning. Major cities showed the telltale signs of occupation. Alien dropships moved between buildings like mechanical wasps. Human military personnel sat in detention camps, their weapons confiscated, their communications cut. The resistance had lasted barely 2 days. So, communications officer Zalneth interrupted. We're receiving final surrender confirmations from the remaining human leadership. They are requesting terms for their population. Kexthaler laughed, a sound like grinding stone. Terms? They have no position to negotiate. Standard protocol. All adult males to the mining colonies. Females and children to the agricultural worlds. Their intellectuals go to the research stations. This was how it always went. The Hegemony had perfected the art of conquest. Overwhelming force, swift victory, systematic dismantling of the defeated civilization. They had done it to the proud warrior clans of Krek 7, to the technologically advanced Etherians, to the psychically gifted thought weavers of the Andromeda Spiral. Each species had believed they were special, that they possessed something unique that would save them. They had all been wrong. The planet's resources are even better than our preliminary surveys indicated, Vordenna continued. Massive freshwater reserves, diverse ecosystems, rich mineral deposits. This world will be one of our most productive acquisitions. Kexthaler nodded approvingly. The Hegemony Council would be pleased. Another successful conquest meant more resources for the war machine, more worlds to fuel their expansion. The galaxy would eventually belong to them entirely. So, Zalneth said, there's something strange in the communications we're intercepting from the surface. Strange how? The humans keep mentioning something called the awakening. Our translation algorithms are having difficulty with the context. It doesn't seem to refer to any military or technological capability. Kexthaler dismissed the concern with a wave of his primary hand. Desperate species always cling to meaningless prophecies and superstitions when they face extinction. Remember the Etherians and their great convergence. The Thought Weavers and their mindstorm. All fantasy. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the ship's systems. Through the massive viewports, Earth continued its slow rotation, looking peaceful and conquered. The Hegemony's victory was complete. Or so they believed. Deep beneath the planet's surface, in places where no human had ever set foot, something stirred. Ancient systems that had been dormant for millennia began to activate. Networks of crystalline structures embedded in the planet's core started to pulse with energy. The vibrations were so subtle that even the hegemony's most sensitive instruments couldn't detect them. But the planet felt them. Earth itself was beginning to wake up. The tremor started small, a barely perceptible vibration that registered on seismographs across the globe, dismissed by hegemony scientists as natural tectonic activity. Dr. Sarah Chen, imprisoned in the research facility that had once been MIT, felt it through the metal floor of her cell. Something deep and rhythmic, like a massive heartbeat. "You feel it too," whispered Professor Marcus Webb from the adjacent cell. The elderly physicist had been one of the first captured when the aliens seized Earth's scientific institutions. "It's not an earthquake." Sarah pressed her ear to the cold floor. The vibration was getting stronger, more regular. "It's coming from everywhere at once." "That's impossible." Above them, hegemony overseer Nexkorvac was growing increasingly frustrated with his human subjects. The reptilian creature had expected quick cooperation from Earth's intellectual elite. Instead, they were proving stubborn and unproductive. "Your species' knowledge is primitive," he hissed at the assembled scientists. "Yet you refuse to share even these basic concepts. Perhaps you need further motivation." Dr. Chen stood slowly, her hands cuffed behind her back. "You want to know why we won't help you? Because you don't understand what you've done. Enlighten me, human. You've invaded a living world." Nexkorvac's throat sac inflated with amusement. "Your planet is no more living than any other ball of rock we've conquered. You mammals and your pathetic attachment to your birth world." But even as he spoke, the tremor was growing stronger. Throughout the facility, alien guards were beginning to notice the unusual seismic activity. Their equipment showed energy readings that didn't match any known geological phenomenon. In orbit, Admiral Kextaler was receiving similar reports from across the planet. The tremors were increasing in frequency and intensity, but they followed no recognizable pattern. The hegemony's geological specialists were baffled. "It's happening on every continent simultaneously," Vordena reported, her voice tight with confusion. "The epic enters are scattered, but the rhythm is synchronized. Almost like..." "Like what?" "Like the planet is breathing." Kextaler's eyes narrowed. "That's impossible. Run full-spectrum analysis on all seismic data. I want to know what's causing this." The answer came from an unexpected source. Deep in the Amazon rainforest, where hegemony forces had established a resource extraction camp, something extraordinary was happening. The trees were moving, not swaying in the wind, but actually moving their positions. Roots were pulling free from the soil, branches were reaching toward the alien machinery, and the sound of creaking wood was growing into a thunderous roar. "Base Command, this is Extraction Team 7, came the panicked voice over the comm. "The vegetation is... it's attacking our equipment. The trees are moving on their own." Similar reports flooded in from around the globe. In the Sahara Desert, sand dunes were shifting into geometric patterns. In the Himalayas, avalanches were flowing upward instead of down. In the ocean, currents were changing direction, creating massive whirlpools that pulled hegemony submarines toward the seafloor. Dr. Chen smiled grimly from her cell as the vibrations grew stronger. "You wanted to know about Earth's defenses? We don't have any. We never needed them." "Explain," Nexkorvac demanded, his composure cracking. "Because Earth defends itself." The truth was something that humanity had suspected but never fully understood. Earth wasn't just a planet with life on it. It was a living entity, a vast consciousness that had been sleeping for millions of years. The emergence of intelligent life on its surface had been part of a natural process, like cells developing in an organism. And now, for the first time in its existence, Earth was under attack. The planet's immune system was activating. In the deepest ocean trenches, massive forms that had never been seen by human eyes began to stir. Creatures that weren't quite animal, weren't quite plant, but something else entirely. The planet's antibodies, waiting for the moment they would be needed. On the surface, the hegemony's occupation forces were beginning to panic. Their advanced technology was failing in ways that defied physics. Weapons wouldn't fire, vehicles wouldn't start, and communication systems were being overwhelmed by a strange harmonic interference that seemed to come from the Earth itself. "So," Zalnath called out, his voice strained, "we're losing contact with our ground forces. The interference is getting stronger." Kexthaler gripped the rail of his command platform. Impossible. What kind of technology could affect our entire fleet simultaneously? It's not technology. Dr. Chen's voice came through the comm system, somehow broadcasting from her cell to every hegemony vessel in the system. It's life. Real life. Something you've never encountered before. The Admiral's blood ran cold. How are you accessing our communications? I'm not. The planet is letting me speak to you. And then, as if to emphasize a point, every screen on every hegemony ship displayed the same image, Earth as seen from space, but the continents were glowing with soft, pulsing light. The planet looked like a vast organism, alive and aware. And it was angry. The first wave hit the hegemony fleet like an invisible tsunami. Ships that had been in perfect formation suddenly found themselves pushed apart by forces that didn't register on any instrument. The Dominion's edge shuddered as something massive passed beneath it, something that shouldn't have been possible in the vacuum of space. Shields are fluctuating, Vordena reported, her voice tight with disbelief. I'm reading massive electromagnetic disturbances, but they are not coming from any artificial source. Admiral Kexthaler watched his tactical display with growing horror. Red warning lights were appearing across the fleet. Ships were reporting system failures, navigation errors, and gravitational anomalies that violated every known law of physics. So, came a transmission from the destroyer Vanguard's might. We're detecting massive structures rising from the planet's surface. They appear to be organic. The main viewer shifted to show the surface of Earth. What they saw defied understanding. Across every continent, enormous formations were emerging from the ground. They looked like trees, but they were hundreds of kilometers tall, their canopies reaching into the upper atmosphere. Their trunks pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to follow the rhythm of the planet's tremors. Those weren't there an hour ago, Kexthaler whispered. But they had been there. They had always been there, hidden beneath the surface, waiting. The world trees, as humanity would later call them, were Earth's neural network made manifest. Each one was a neuron in a planetary brain that was finally awakening to defend itself. On the surface, the hegemony's occupation forces were in full retreat. In what had once been New York City, Brutak heavy infantry were fleeing from buildings that had begun to move. The concrete and steel structures were bending and twisting like living things, their windows blinking in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The entire city is alive, reported squad leader Vexton, his massive form stumbling through streets that were reshaping themselves around him. The buildings are hunting us. It wasn't just buildings. The asphalt beneath their feet had become soft and yielding, like flesh. Street lamps were bending down to watch them pass, their lights pulsing in hypnotic patterns. Even the air itself seemed hostile, growing thick and oppressive whenever they tried to use their weapons. Dr. Chen sat in her cell, no longer bound by the restraints that had somehow unlocked themselves. Around her, the research facility was transforming. The walls were becoming transparent, revealing a vast network of roots and filaments that connected every building on the planet. She could see the flow of information, the planetary consciousness awakening to its own existence. You should have left when you had the chance, she told Nex Korvac, who was cowering in the corner of what had once been his command center. The hegemony overseer's skin had turned pale gray with terror. What is this? What are you? We're not doing this, Sarah replied calmly. We're just part of it. This is what happens when you attack a living world. In the Pacific Ocean, something unimaginably vast was rising from the depths. The hegemony submarine fleet watched in horror as the sea floor itself began to lift, revealing that what they had mistaken for underwater mountain ranges were actually the ridgebacks of sleeping titans. Creatures that were part animal, part plant, part something else entirely, Earth's own immune system coming online. The largest of these beings was the size of a continent. Its awakening caused tsunamis that raced across the ocean, but these weren't destructive waves. They were carrying something, billions of microscopic organisms that immediately began attacking any artificial material they encountered. Hegemony ships found their hulls dissolving, their electronics failing, their life support systems shutting down. All vessels, emergency ascent. Kexthaler commanded, "Get us out of the atmosphere." But it was too late. The world trees had reached orbital altitude, their canopies unfurling like massive umbrellas. The space around Earth was no longer empty. It was filled with a living lattice of branches and leaves that pulsed with energy. The trees weren't just growing. They were hunting. The first ship to be caught was the cruiser Stellar Dominion. The crew watched in terror as luminescent vines wrapped around their vessel, growing through the hull as if it were made of water. The ship's weapons fired automatically, but the energy beams were absorbed by the plant matter, which only grew stronger. "Mayday! Mayday!" came the transmission. "We're being boarded by a forest." And then the signal cut out. Admiral Kexthaler realized the truth with dawning horror. This wasn't a military defense. This wasn't technology. This was biology on a scale that the hegemony had never encountered. They had invaded a single organism disguised as a planet, and now that organism was fighting back. "Sir," Vordena said, her voice barely above a whisper, "long-range sensors are detecting similar activity on every world we've conquered. The planets they're all waking up." The implications hit Kexthaler like a physical blow. If Earth was alive, if planets could be living entities, then the hegemony hadn't been conquering worlds. They had been killing them. And now, across the galaxy, the murdered world were returning to life, seeking revenge. "Contact the Hegemony Council," he ordered. "Tell them we're withdrawing from the system immediately." But as he spoke, the Dominion's edge shuttered again. Through the viewports, he could see that they were surrounded. The world trees had formed a cage around the entire fleet, their branches interlocking in complex patterns that seemed to pulse with intelligence. They weren't leaving. Not until Earth was finished with them. The transformation of Earth accelerated beyond anything the hegemony could have imagined. Within hours, the planet had become something entirely new, a vast, interconnected organism that spanned continents and reached into space itself. The world trees pulsed with energy patterns that created a living web around the planet, and at the center of it all, humanity was changing too. Dr. Chen stood in what had once been her cell, but the walls had dissolved into a flowing, organic membrane that showed her everything happening across the globe. She could see through the eyes of every human on Earth, feel their thoughts and emotions as they merged with the planetary consciousness. "We're not disappearing," she realized aloud. "We're becoming part of something bigger." The sensation was overwhelming but not frightening. Humanity had always been connected to Earth, but now that connection was becoming literal. People were discovering they could communicate with the planet directly, feel its pain from the invasion, understand its ancient wisdom. Professor Webb appeared beside her, his form slightly translucent. "The neural pathways are stabilizing. We're becoming the planet's conscious mind while it handles the physical response." Above them, the battle for Earth's orbital space was unlike anything in the galaxy's recorded history. The hegemony fleet found themselves fighting not ships or weapons, but a living ecosystem that adapted and evolved with every attack. The world trees released clouds of spores that ate through armor plating. Root systems extended into space, wrapping around vessels and pulling them toward the planet's surface. Admiral Kexthaler watched his fleet being systematically dismantled by forces that shouldn't have been possible. The Dominion's Edge was one of the last ships still maintaining formation, but even it was beginning to show signs of organic infiltration. Vine-like growths were appearing on the hull, and the ship's own systems were being turned against them. "So," Zalneth reported, "the organic matter is interfacing with our computers. It's learning our technology faster than we can adapt." "Impossible," Kexthaler snarled. "Plants don't have the intelligence to." "They are not plants," interrupted a new voice. Dr. Chen's image appeared on the main screen, but she looked different now. Her eyes held depth that seemed to contain the wisdom of geological ages. "They are neurons. We all are. You're not fighting a planet. You're fighting a mind." The Admiral's four hands clenched into fists. "You're still human. You can be reasoned with. Call off this attack, and we'll negotiate terms." Dr. Chen smiled sadly. "You still don't understand. This isn't an attack. It's healing. Earth is healing itself from the infection you represent." As if to demonstrate her point, the organic growth on the ship's hull suddenly accelerated. The entire vessel shuddered as root systems penetrated the command deck itself. But instead of causing damage, the roots began to merge with the ship's systems, creating hybrid technology that was part machine, part living organism. "The ship is being absorbed," Vordena said, her voice filled with wonder rather than fear. "But the crew, they're not being harmed." They are being integrated. It was true. Throughout the fleet, hegemony soldiers were discovering that the organic growths didn't want to destroy them. They wanted to understand them. The planet was learning from every species it touched, adding their knowledge and capabilities to its own growing consciousness. But not everyone was willing to be integrated. All ships, fire everything. Kexthaler commanded, destroy the planetary surface. If we can't conquer it, we'll make it uninhabitable. The remaining hegemony vessels opened fire with their most powerful weapons. Nuclear warheads, antimatter charges, and planet cracker beams lanced down toward Earth's surface. For a moment, it seemed like the attack might succeed. Then the world trees moved as one. The massive organisms bent and twisted, their canopies forming a perfect shield around the planet. The incoming weapons were absorbed completely, their energy redirected and converted into fuel for Earth's continued transformation. The nuclear fire that should have burned continents instead fed the growth of new neural pathways. The antimatter explosions became seeds for organic structures that defied physics. It's feeding on our weapons, Vordena whispered. Everything we throw at it makes it stronger. But the most shocking revelation came from the planet's surface. In the areas where the most powerful weapons had struck, something new was emerging. Hybrid structures that combined hegemony technology with Earth's organic systems. The planet wasn't just defending itself. It was learning, adapting, becoming something greater than either side had been alone. This is what we were meant to be, Dr. Chen said, her voice now carrying harmonics that resonated through every speaker in the fleet. Not conquerors or conquered, but partners in something magnificent. Admiral Kexthaler felt something he had never experienced before, doubt. The hegemony had built its entire civilization on the principle of conquest, of taking what they needed from weaker species. But what if they had been wrong? What if there was another way? The question became moot as the Dominion's Edge completed its transformation. The ship was no longer purely mechanical or purely organic. It was something new, something that combined the best of both natures. The crew found themselves changed as well. Their consciousness expanded to encompass perspectives they had never imagined. Sir, Zalner said, his voice filled with awe, I can see it all. The entire galaxy. Every world we've conquered, every species we've enslaved. They are all connected. They are all part of a greater organism that we never recognized. Through the ship's new organic senses, they could perceive the truth that had been hidden from them. The galaxy itself was alive, a vast network of interconnected worlds that formed a single, immense consciousness. The hegemony had been like a virus, preventing the galaxy from achieving its full potential. But now Earth was showing them a different path. The choice is yours, Dr. Chen said, her image now appearing to be composed of starlight and living energy. You can continue to fight against the natural order, or you can join us in becoming something greater than any of us could be alone. Admiral Kexthaler looked around his transformed bridge, at his crew who were becoming something new and wonderful. For the first time in his life, he felt hope instead of hunger for conquest. Signal the fleet, he said quietly. Stand down, all weapons. We're going to listen. The integration wasn't immediate or easy. Throughout the solar system, the transformation continued as Earth's influence spread to every vessel, every space station, every artificial structure that humans and the hegemony had built. But this wasn't conquest, it was evolution, and evolution required understanding, not force. Admiral Kexthaler found himself in a space that defied description. The bridge of the Dominion's Edge had become something between a garden and a command center, with living walls that pulsed with information and organic interfaces that responded to thought as much as touch. He could feel the consciousness of every crew member, every human on Earth, even the planet itself. This is what we were trying to achieve, he said, speaking to Dr. Chen, who appeared beside him like a ghost made of light and living matter. The hegemony wanted unity, but we were doing it wrong. You were trying to create unity through domination, she replied. But real unity comes from cooperation, from each part contributing its unique strengths to the whole. Through the new sensory network, Kexthaler could perceive the galaxy as Earth now saw it. Every world was a node in a vast neural network, each species a different type of cell in a galactic organism. The hegemony had been cutting those connections, isolating worlds, and turning them into resources instead of letting them fulfill their natural function. Can it be reversed? He asked. The damage we've done. Not reversed, Dr. Chen said, but healed, transformed into something better. The proof was already beginning. On Mars, long-dormant systems were awakening as Earth's influence reached across space. The red planet had once been alive, its consciousness oppressed by some ancient catastrophe. Now it was stirring, its core beginning to pulse with renewed energy. But the real miracle was happening throughout the galaxy. On every world the hegemony had conquered, the enslaved populations were feeling the change. The oppressive control systems were failing as the planets themselves began to reassert their living nature. What had been weapons of conquest were becoming tools of restoration. So, Vordena said, her voice filled with wonder, we're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. The conquered worlds they're singing. It was the only word for it. From dozens of star systems came a harmonious sound that was part music, part communication, part celebration. The galactic consciousness was awakening, and it was joyful. On Earth, humanity was experiencing its own transformation. People weren't losing their individuality. They were discovering that their individual perspectives were part of something magnificent. Dr. Chen could still feel herself, her memories and personality intact, but she was also aware of the vast network of consciousness that connected every living thing. What happens now? Asked Professor Webb, who had become something like Earth's memory center, maintaining the historical knowledge of both human and planetary experience. Now we grow, Dr. Chen replied. We help other worlds awaken. We show the galaxy what it means to be truly alive. The process wasn't without challenges. Some members of the hegemony fleet refused integration, choosing to retreat to the outer rim of the galaxy rather than surrender their old ways. But for every ship that fled, 2 more chose to stay and become part of the new order. Admiral Kex Thaler became Earth's first ambassador to the galactic consciousness, helping to establish communication with worlds that had been cut off from the network for millennia. His military knowledge, combined with Earth's biological wisdom, created new ways of healing the damage that had been done. The irony, he said during one of the planning sessions that took place in a shared consciousness space, is that we achieved our goal. We unified the galaxy. We just didn't realize that it was already unified. We were the ones breaking it apart. The transformation spread outward from Earth like ripples in a pond. Within months, the entire solar system had become a living organism, with each planet contributing its unique properties to the whole. Jupiter became a massive processing center, its storms generating the energy needed for interstellar communication. Saturn's rings became a transmission array, sending the awakening signal to distant worlds. But the most profound change was in the nature of consciousness itself. The barriers between species, between individuals, between planets and the void of space began to dissolve, not into uniformity, but into a symphony where every voice was distinct yet part of the greater whole. We thought we were conquering worlds, Kex Thaler reflected as he stood in the transformed bridge, watching the galaxy pulse with new life. But we were really just preventing the universe from becoming conscious of itself. Dr. Chen smiled, her form now a beautiful hybrid of human features and stellar energy. And now it is. The galaxy is awake, and it's beautiful. Through the organic viewports, they could see the evidence of that awakening. Stars that had been merely nuclear furnaces were now revealing their true nature as neurons in a cosmic brain. Nebulae weren't just gas clouds. They were the galaxy's circulatory system, carrying information and energy between distant worlds. What about the other galaxies? Vordena asked. If this one is conscious, what about the others? They are waking up too, Dr. Chen said. The awakening is spreading. Soon, the entire universe will be alive, aware, and connected. The hegemony's invasion of Earth had been intended as just another conquest in their march across the galaxy. Instead, it had become the moment when the universe itself achieved consciousness. The tremors that had started as Earth's defensive response had become the first movements of a cosmic awakening that would transform everything. And at the center of it all, humanity found its true purpose, not as conquerors or conquered, but as a bridge between individual awareness and universal consciousness, helping to create a future where every star, every world, every living thing could be part of something infinitely greater than themselves. The ground had stopped shaking. The universe had learned to dance.